Hello, you've caught me thinking about all the things I take for granted. Or maybe that should be all the things I used to take for granted, but will now be forever grateful for. Being able to play amazing video games is one of those things. I mean, I still can't quite believe I'm lucky enough to exist at the same time as Final Fantasy VII Remake, thank you, universe. Which got me thinking about all the things we take for granted in games. You know, stuff that in 2020 is just a given, but that if you travelled back in time to show someone in the early 90s would blow the bangs right off their forehead. So here are 7 amazing innovations that changed video games forever. Number 1. Playing games in 3 dimensions. This was a huge moment for the medium. Players went from essentially spectators with sore thumbs, watching a 2D sprite running sideways across a screen while occasionally jumping and shooting at things, to active participants. The emergence of first-person shooters was an important milestone for 3D gaming, and while 1992's Wolfenstein 3D is affectionately known as the grandfather of the genre, Doom is the game often credited for bringing this amazing new technological revolution to mainstream audiences. And it's difficult for us to imagine, nearly 30 years on now, what it was like for gamers back then getting their hands on this for the first time. This moment could be seen as the seed from which video games as an immersive medium grew. In Doom, the world felt like it was all around you. Enemies came from all directions, your gun was thrust out in front of your eyes, you saw it light up when you fired, and the gory mess it made of any demons foolish enough to get too close. For the first time, you felt like you were doing these things, rather than controlling someone else. The FPS genre evolved to a point where the line between player and protagonist became blurred enough that when BioShock came along in the late 2000s, we ourselves felt tricked by the now iconic "would you kindly" twist. This wasn't the villain tricking the main character, it was the game toying with you. It's the kind of thing games do all the time now, bursting through the fourth wall with a cheeky smile and a bronze trophy, usually called something like "see what we did there." But this kind of clever, playful immersion only came about because some clever clogs many years ago thought to themselves, I know, how about we do a game where you can move forwards and backwards, as well as left and right? Well done, that clever clogs. Well done indeed. Entry 2. Open worlds. A huge number of games are open world in 2020, or at least have open world elements and allow you to tackle them in a non-linear fashion. This kind of player freedom is so prevalent we just expect it now. But cast your mind back to PS1 and there was one game bringing open worlds to the mainstream like no other before it: Grand Theft Auto. The top-down 2.5D original was groundbreaking in so many ways. I mean, playing as a character who wasn't necessarily heroic was one thing, but being able to pretty much drive anywhere you wanted in a city without limits was something else. And while open-world video games had been around in some form before the original GTA, it's hard to argue the standard we see in video games today wasn't a result of the series going fully 3D in 2001 with the release of Grand Theft Auto 3. This was a watershed moment. Open worlds colliding with 3 dimensions. It was like Rockstar had opened the door to a new gaming universe. The traditional structure of player level, beta boss, play next level was no longer the only way to do things, and thanks to the foundations laid by GTA 3, we're now spoiled with open world riches: Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Death Stranding, and the peerless Red Dead Redemption 2, Rockstar's modern masterpiece that feels very much like the studio pushing player freedom to new heights, are all incredible adventures, but perhaps more importantly, are set in these incredibly rich, enormous worlds that are simply a joy to explore. Entry 3. Now, boot up any action-adventure game on PS4 and there's a good chance you can go about things in one of 2 ways. You can run around blowing everything to bits, or you can creep about snapping everyone's neck without anyone seeing you. Even games that want you to make lots of cinematic noise and engage in epic firefights usually give you the option of ghosting it. I mean, I played Uncharted 4, for instance, as if Nathan Drake was role-playing Solid Snake. And that's where our third innovation comes in: stealth. Or if not stealth specifically, the notion that you don't have to engage every single enemy you encounter. Metal Gear Solid was the game that popularised and crucially made lots of fun the idea that creeping past enemies unseen was just as exciting as running up and blowing all their faces off with a shotgun. It was hide and seek the game, only with nuclear war at stake instead of 10 minutes of ferocious arguing with your sibling about whether or not hiding in the laundry basket was cheating. So simple, yet so brilliant. Metal Gear's non-lethal ethos has echoed through the generations to the point where tranquilizer guns and hiding in bushes or round corners to get the drop on your enemies is now just a thing we expect to be in games. You know, if you sneak up behind someone, even if you're playing, I don't know, Boom Boom Shoot the Room 4 Big Orange Fire Edition, you expect there to be a prompt for a silent takedown. Like most of the entries on this list, this is an innovation that, at its essence, is about giving the player choice, about making you feel as though you're directing how the game pans out, rather than being pushed along a linear route by some invisible force. And then you get Metal Gear Solid 5, an open-world stealth game, the result of years of industry iteration and absorption of countless influences, including those of its own predecessors, folded into one glorious package. If the expansion of player choice is the guiding principle behind all these innovations so far, our fourth entry brings it front and centre, and that is allowing the player to choose how they act in the story and affecting the overall outcome as a result. It's difficult to mark exactly where this started. For decades, video games have served up multiple endings triggered by the player completing or not completing certain actions over the course of their adventure. But it was the dialogue wheels of games like Mass Effect and Dragon Age that popularised and streamlined the idea of free narrative choice for mainstream audiences. You got to choose what Commander Shepard said, and the idea that these rich sci-fi worlds shifted and flexed around your decisions took the idea of role-playing to new heights. You could have 5 people play Mass Effect 2 and all experience wildly different stories. Maybe one of you romanced Miranda, another could have got it on with Garrus. If your name's David Jackson, no one would love you, no matter how many loyalty missions you did or how flirtatious you were with your dialogue options. Then you had the likes of Heavy Rain and the Telltale games, and most recently Detroit Become Human, where choosing how you want to act is the core gameplay. The dialogue wheel or some variation thereof is such a given now, even in games with only one possible story outcome, that it's kind of shocking when you don't get to have some kind of input on what your character says. Even Final Fantasy VII Remake, with its story very much set in stone, lets you pick dialogue options for Cloud every so often. Again, it all comes down to blurring that line between player and protagonist, immersing audiences in these rich worlds and giving us freedom of choice. Although, really, there should be a dialogue option here that says, "Hell yes, I'll come over for pizza, Jesse. In fact, let's do it right now. Fire up that oven. Who even is Tifa?" Entry 5, Online Multiplayer. Now, there may be some of you watching who've never known a world where you couldn't hook up with friends or complete strangers halfway around the world and enjoy a casual round of team deathmatch or a nice dungeon raid. But I remember it well. In fact, I distinctly remember the very first time I ever played a game online against someone. It was PES 6 on my PS2. I was in my university dorm room. I decided to shove the Ethernet cable from my laptop into the back of the console, and all of a sudden, I was playing football against someone I couldn't see or shout at. I mean, I could shout at them, and did, they just couldn't hear me. Anyway, it was a tense match, 0-0 until extra time, and then I headed in a scruffy winner in the 115th minute. I went wild. What a feeling. I then discovered Metal Gear Online, the one that came bundled with Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence. I was floored by this new technological wizardry. I even made a small group of online friends I knew only by their usernames and the way they typed. I remember crying when they eventually shut the servers down. Obviously, online multiplayer is just the norm now. Even games that are primarily single-player often have some kind of online element, even if it's not actively playing with other people. Connectivity is the important thing. Games are an amazing social medium, and being able to hang out with friends in virtual spaces feels more important than ever. Even if by hang out you mean lasso and pull through the dirt in Red Dead Online while they swear down the headset at you. Entry 6 is creation. Now, if Metal Gear popularised the idea that you didn't have to engage with every enemy, then games like Little Big Planet and more recently Dreams have shown us you don't necessarily need enemies at all. Making your own stuff and sharing it with everyone else via the magic of entry number 5 on this list is wonderfully rewarding. The philosophy of player creation and cooperation exploded into popular culture with the release of Minecraft, now one of the biggest and most influential video games in history. While this differs from the pure creation of games like Dreams, it is still, at its core, a game about making stuff. And not just making stuff, but cooperatively making stuff. You've probably seen those outrageous videos online of people recreating famous fictional cities in Minecraft. You know, there's King's Landing from Game of Thrones and Novigrad from The Witcher 3, and it's kind of mind-boggling. Crafting feels like an essential part of video game DNA in 2020. Death Stranding, for instance, lets you pull resources online and build a road network. You can boot up the game and all of a sudden these great tarmac serpents rise from the earth, a physical manifestation of the invisible bond you share with other players. Our final entry and most recent innovation is one that has completely changed the way we enjoy video games, and that is the emergence of games as a spectator sport. I mean, you could argue eSports is the flower that bloomed from the seed of quiet pleasure we all get when watching others play games. Even before YouTube, back when I was a kid, I'd regularly sit and watch my sister play whatever she was playing and vice versa. Now you can watch games like Overwatch, Fortnite and Rocket League played by professionals to insanely high standards, or you can watch bumbling noobs like us trying to work out how to play the simplest of games on YouTube. You could even say watching games as well as playing them is an amalgamation of many previous innovations. Again, it's about choice. Not so much choice as in, do you sneak or shoot? Are you good or bad? But more choice as in, how do you want to interact with this game? How do you want to connect with others? How do you want to share your experience? In 2020, we are spoiled rotten when it comes to video games. So many people play them now. They're rich, immersive, spectacular, and more accessible than ever before. So let us know in the comments if you can think of any innovations we've missed. Give us a like if you enjoyed the video. Click the notification bell to keep up to date with everything on the channel, and join us again next week for another Friday feature. Thanks for watching.
For the players.